from an integral point of view. It generates incentives for economic growth. Cell, which is whom we were discussing below, is the Salvadorian Public Utilities Company, and its subsidiaries include Etasal, which is the national transmission company, Lajeo, which is where we are right now in one of its facilities, as well as other smaller generators. Between it generates around 50% of the country's energy, and at some points a bit more. Between hydroelectric and geothermal, this is our current installed capacity. We now have in each one of the hydroelectric plants within the country with 392 megawatts, and soon to add the 3rd of February that comes into operation next year, and geothermal energy at about 140 installed capacity between the two plants and the binary cycles that are in place, as is what is being developed in the near future for the second binary plant here. This is our country's energy matrix. This is a 2020 representation, so it's a bit atypical because it was a pandemic year, but this is 2019, which is more or less how it behaves. As you can see, between geothermal and hydro, it reaches very close to 50% most of the time, but there is another 30 to 40% that is dependent on bunker, which is bunker fuel oil, or imports from neighboring countries. This is just the injection. So one of the key aspects that occurred over this past year is the recognition to create an integrated energy policy that looks towards the short, middle, and long term in a way that you use it as a vehicle for development. So over the past year, 3 important reforms have been made to our legislation. 2 of them were reforms, and a 3rd is the introduction of an entity that did not exist before, which is the Direction of Energy, which is now the entity in charge of creating, guiding, monitoring, and executing energy policy for El Salvador. And CEL has played a critical role in that creation of that entity. It was approved a few weeks ago and published recently in our official paper, which makes it law. So that will create the direction and will be the entity that guides and directs the entire energy system in El Salvador. We're now in Lajeo, and Lajeo is, of course, the state-owned company dedicated to production of geothermal energy. This is what the generation has been over the past many decades. And as you can see from the, I thought it was this slide, but we'll see it. We haven't had a real injection into our system since 2007. Right now, we have a Huachapan with about 95 megawatts of installed capacity. We're now at Berlín, which you were able to tour and see that it has 109 installed capacity. And this has been the historic of CEL's periods of time in which it has increased its generation. Why am I mentioning this? Because this is a critical part of the new energy policy, to create an expansion, as I was mentioning, of around 95 megawatts. This is what that plan looks like between 2 new fields that are not currently producing, and expansion of the 2 fields that are producing, Huachapan and Berlín. And that will have an increase over the next 3 years of 95 additional megawatts. As you were asking, what are the next steps for mining? That's still not defined. What is defined is we've started with 1 megawatt, and there will be an increase over time. How that will look like will depend on decisions, but it is also related to the 95 megawatts additional that are wanting to be used for industrial purposes or blockchain applications. We wanted to take advantage of this as well to tell you that we're also looking into the possibility of green hydrogen using geothermal as a source of energy. And that's the short presentation.
Hay otra pregunta.
Sí, claro, sí.
Wir haben eine falsche Frage gehabt. Vielleicht könnt ihr jetzt genau treffen.
What's like the price for private customers? What's the current price for private customers per kilowatt hour and for commercial customers?
So it will oscillate between 10 and 15 cents per kilowatt hour. It really depends on where that price is being, the margin is being there. It's usually set in the dry seasons by the price of petroleum. In the rainy season, since we have the hydroelectric, it's less dependent on fuel like bunker production.
Okay, but private customers it's like 10 cents.
It'll oscillate between 10 to 15 cents.
Okay, thanks.
Could you just show the size of the countries, the energy consumption
Yes.
or production?
The matrix.
Just for, there was a pie chart in the beginning.
Yes.
That's what out of interest.
No, that's not funcionando. I'll put it in a second.
Okay, so no problem.
Right.
I have a short question. Is all energy generated from El Salvador from cell, or is there also a private energy sector?
So hydroelectric and geothermal is generated through Cell and its subsidiaries. There is, for instance, biomass is private. These are sugarcane mills, basically. Solar is basically private. I don't think we have any of that. And thermal, there is a small participation from Cell, but it's basically private owned.
¿Qué significa térmica?
Sorry?
Térmica?
Thermal energy, and it's primarily bunker plants. Like fuel oil?
Fuel oil.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many megawatts is El Salvador using at the moment? You showed us like 300 or 140 megawatts from geothermal, and or I mean the whole country.
So it'll be, right now, this is the installed capacity, and that's about 50%, so double that. It depends, right? But it's about that.
Okay, letzte Frage. Habt ihr noch Fragen? Ja, klar.
Which is the cheapest energy for you? Like, if you put that down, like, what's the cheapest to import to?
So the reason why there is an import is because it's cheaper to import than to produce with thermal energy many times. So in many cases that happens. However, both geothermal and hydroelectric are usually the cheapest.
Okay, danke schön, thank you very much.
Gracias.
Gracias.